to my chat.
All right, hello everybody. This is T-Strife Games, and I'm with DerpThought. And
hello.
Hello. And we will be doing a deep dive into Hades, and that's just us examining the game, what makes it great, and talking about the different elements of it.
Few tales are told of Hades,
So yeah,
whose very name inspires fear and
It is a pleasure. I just got done playing through a quick run and to get my juices flowing on just the gameplay elements and revisiting the new. I haven't played the new Blood Prince update yet, which I haven't seen what is new because I'm not very far in it. But you've beaten the game, haven't you?
no, I haven't actually. I've only gotten to the third biome.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so you got
I haven't
past
gotten too far.
the dragon dude I just died at, but then the next one
Yeah.
gave you a whooping.
Yeah, it's like I haven't seen any of the new update. I haven't even launched it yet, so.
Okay.
But it's like, talk about a game that's in early access, but just amazing with its content.
Right. Oh my gosh, I think it's one of the best examples of a roguelite to date. Like, it's... I don't know how to describe it, because you gotta think about, go back to Rogue itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
The original game that it came from.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I never played that. I wanted to actually look it up more, but I just understand that that's really what the element of Rogue, the original Rogue game, the Rogue style was. Of course, you play through a rundown, like a type of game dungeon, or you go through level by level. You die, you restart. You get nothing else. You have to play through it all again. And I don't think you had progression in the old one, because we're talking about the Atari days where it was hard to save
the
a megabyte of memory.
The original one was all text based.
Mm-hmm.
And that was
That's
when
right.
it first started, yeah.
So that was the epitome of what created roguelites and roguelite and roguelikes.
Yeah,
which is a good
which
segue.
Is kind of it's a lot more vague nowadays, because the rogue, I was looking it up, and roguelike and roguelite is very used interchangeably quite a bit now. And but like the whole term with roguelite was like the original it was like the first term of games that were like the original Rogue game. It's like that was the first term used, and it was used to describe games with like the permadeath element and like the procedural generation. But yeah, so it's like it's still very vague. I was looking it up, and it's like there's no definite like definition of what the genre is. I mean, you can of course go back to like the original roguelike and the original Rogue game, but besides that, it's like people kind of just use it to describe elements now, instead of just it being the Rogue game. So
it's like taking the pieces that made Rogue so amazing to the audience back then and recreating them with modern twists. I mean, a couple games that come to mind that from the past that immediately is like FTL, faster than light travel.
Yeah,
it's like where it's a turn-based RPG roguelite. So you're taking, and the reason why it's roguelite is because of the progression system and that iterative approach where you start fresh from every run. And actually, that's a great example of, I think, what would be more of a real rogue-esque or rogue-like game. Whereas you're going through every time, maybe unlocking new things that you can get in the game, but you might never see them. You start in vanilla. If I remember right, you start vanilla every time. And you have to work your way up based off of whatever your ship start is, So you go through that, and whereas go to Hades or some of these isometric style dungeon crawl games that are roguelite, and it's definitely, it's permadeath in the sense that you have to restart the run,
Mhm.
but you are progressing in the sense I just unlocked having an extra dash ability. Well, I didn't have to purchase that going into the next run. I have it right from the beginning, so you have like a bit of a stat boost. Or another one that
The carryover.
yeah, the carryover. Another one, like a good example of that, of a roguelike or roguelite. I keep. Again,
I know
so it's
they're
like,
so interchangeable now.
they
It's
are.
hard
I
to-
mean, in reality, they're not different.
No.
But to the main, the mainstream audience. But by the best, I think, argument I heard was a roguelike with a K is more like, more like Rogue itself, going back to the permadeath and
yeah.
restart, that loop. Whereas a roguelite is more of a progressive game. So it's interesting, and in the reality, they're all not rogues. So it's just
Yeah.
to borrow something.
I mean,
familiar.
it's just describing the genre now more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because Rogue was so unique that it created its own genre. So it's like, of course, it's gonna be like roguelike. Okay, yeah, it's like that game that started it all. So, but yeah, it's interesting. I was looking into it and how it's like, there's no definite definition except if you go like into, there was like a hardcore roguelike community that got together in like Berlin that tried to define it. And it's like, even then, it was like they kind of just were picking and choosing what elements were more like rogue and not, and defining it that way. So again, it's all about like the elements that the rogue like genre is now more than anything. So
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like there's an uptick in the popularity, mainly in the Indian. Oh my gosh.
indie, yeah,
The
indie devs.
audience. But the indie dev games are borrowing been a long day. Borrowing those elements a lot. And I love to see them in basically any style of game. It's like, it's kind of crazy because you start to think, well, it's a fluid kind of genre enough where it's almost unfair to put the label on certain games, because that element can be in Zelda. It's like the idea that you're doing a dungeon crawl, and if you mess up the dungeon, you restart from the beginning. You're progressing the whole game, but that dungeon feel is like most rogue-like games today. And so it's interesting.
Well, yeah, I remember the original, the Ocarina of Time, how you save your game. You save the dungeon progress, but you always started from the beginning.
Right.
And the enemies were always there. But yeah, it had slight elements like that. But yeah, it's like with the indie games, it's like I like the carryover aspect because it seems like they're trying to refine the genre more and make it, no, I don't want to say accessible, because it's like roguelikes appeal to certain audience and not by themselves. But with the carryover, it's like it adds interesting elements, like with Hades. They're not just carrying over items and all that stuff. They're carrying over like actual story.
Right.
Because
there's
like
a progression to the game.
yeah, and it's like
Supergiant does a great job on that.
Oh yeah, and Supergiant is also the developers of like Pyre, Transistor, Bastion, all really, really, really good games.
Yes.
They're kind of
And
like
that's-
the developer that you can buy from with knowing that, like, well, they're gonna make good stuff regardless.
Right. I mean, that's their forte. That really is their whole deal, is they make games that try to stick with you. They're not just, I'm playing through with an accessible light story. It's like, no, they want to do a huge story. They want to do something that's subtle in some ways, but really bold and not the same as every other game coming out. And I think they do an excellent job. It's like, it's kind of the same element every time. One that I think they took more of a stab at something new, even further than what they were used to doing, is like Pyre, with the whole style of like a sports arena.
Oh, I
Maybe
love
not,
that.
It's just, I actually haven't played it, and I've watched some of the gameplay. Whereas you go to Hades, it's like Transistor. It's more like Bastion. That's their bread and butter. But Pyre, they really stepped outside that bound and made something that felt different, but still followed that same core gameplay element and the feel of their other games.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I know it was they make very unique experiences.
Yep.
And part of that is just their gorgeous artwork too. They always,
oh my gosh.
They always put in a lot of detail on, well, all of the environments and characters. And I was like, I love the Hades character design because it's like you actually just sit there and you examine like the little things hanging off their belts and stuff. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a symbol of this aspect of the mythology in it. And it's like, it's just really neat.
Oh yeah, they got some Greek mythology brains on their team. I'm sure they've had a lot of hours just studying all those little details and trying to pull them out in their artwork and the style of each game. I know. I mean, just so let's speak about Hades. I really want to talk about that game because one of the things is okay if I go first.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
It's like I think the one thing that this is all Supergiant games, but comes through to me so much in this game is the stinking music. How good it is! I sit there and listen to this music. I almost get too distracted at times at the boss fights. I'm like wanting to hear all the tones and subtle riffs going on, the bass guitar that's going. It's kind of like a weird modern take on Greek music.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
it's so
very cool.
Yeah.
It's immersive and it's intense, especially on the boss fights. And,
yeah.
So you gotta get the soundtrack. And then you can listen to it however you want.
I really should. It's a fun game, and I don't know if it's my GOTY, my game of the year, but it's high up there. I'm like, when I sit here and actually play through it, it's I don't know. So what to you sticks out the most in that? I'm curious.
Well, the one thing that made me actually notice it as a roguelike, because I usually don't play roguelikes. They're really not my cup of tea.
No, they're not.
And
I haven't seen you play many others.
It's like I dabbled in Dead Cells and things like that, but I burnt out on that one really fast. It's like this one, I think what caught me right away was the artwork, for one. I didn't even know it was Supergiant until I looked into it, but the artwork caught my attention. I'm like, this looks really unique. Mm-hmm. And then actually playing it, the story and the character interactions is like, well, and I was so surprised when I was playing it for the first time and how many times I was dying. There was still new dialogue every single time. Yep. And I'm like, how it's not regurgitated, it's not repeated, it's actually new dialogue and interaction with the characters. And it's like, how? What? They put a lot of thought into this. And so like, that's the big thing that really caught my attention and made me want to keep playing it, because I'm like, well, if I want to see if I can tap it out. And as I was about to tap it out, it's like I'm going through the first level again, and I encounter a different boss than Meg, the first one. Spoilers. Well, yeah, I know, but this is a deep dive, so. But it's like I actually encountered a different boss because I had fought Meg so many times that it's like, here, let's change it up, and I'm like, whoa, what? And it made me wanna play more because I'm like, well, now I want to know what this character is.
Yep.
And so that's what's kind of been keeping me going back to it, because of the story. Because usually roguelikes, I get a little interested in like the world, but then there's not much storytelling behind it, so I'm like, I burn out a bit. I like having that drive of a story in it. So.
Yeah. Now, story is a huge thing in their games, and it sticks out. I'm thinking about Bastion when I played that way back when, because that was like one of their classics.
Well, I think that's like one of their first ones, yeah.
It is, yeah. And I'm thinking how it felt more like a storybook
Yeah.
Then this
With the
one does.
narrator.
This is the narrator. This has that narrator, and that gives you that storybook feel, but it's more of an instant. You feel like you're more connected to the characters than the story. Whereas it feels like the story, good example would be Transistor. Playing through Transistor, their style was more the memories of what you went through. And it was a great narrative, and the way they approached that, it was such a good way to write that out. But Hades feels personal almost at times, where it tries to make you connect with Zagreus and the core characters and you understand.
Well, that's the thing. It's interesting because it's like, it's you as it's unfolding. It's not like, oh, we're not looking back. We're just like, we're actively, it's like, let's say in terms of writing, it's present tense.
Right.
Because it's actively happening in front of your eyes instead of just like, oh, it's a recall. It's, let's think about the past, or like a storybook,
Yep. Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think if I encountered any other game, like in my head, like from this perspective, like that little isometric view, and gotten that kind of feel. It's like, I think at Diablo, that franchise,
tense,
but
yeah.
it doesn't give me that connection in that loop like this one does.
No.
I love the bite-sizedness of a roguelite versus an action RPG. It's like an action RPG is more that constant grind, whereas this is a grind that is taken in small doses if you want it that way, or sit there and play it all night and you can win the game or not. It's just, and the fun factor for me, I think, is the combat that blends so well with all the other elements to make you just feel like you're lost in the game. I get that little moment of, I'm just sitting here, and this is my zone out game. Like, I can sit here and zone out to it and just enjoy the music. The combat's constantly fun. There's no bugs that I've encountered other than like a bug just now in the menu system. But just because I switched my windowed mode or something like that. But that, I don't think I've encountered a crash. I think that's one thing I want to highlight, is that this is early access. It's something that indie games and companies like Supergiant have been doing so well to do that AAA studios aren't able to achieve at times. Is this quality, where it's not, a gigantic production they've spent millions of dollars on, but it's something that they're proud of and they know it's solid. And it's not, I'm sure there's tons of bugs out there. You can go look at patch notes, and various systems are going to have them, but their core game is already there. And I'll go play a AAA title that comes out with day one patches because it's just not even working.
Yeah, it's not fully done.
Yeah,
it feels like, and that's the thing. Well, that kind of goes back to early access, and it's like Hades really does like set the bar for early access games.
It's almost unfair
because it's so done.
It is,
and yet it's like, yeah, it's early access. We're still updating. We're not done. The developers are like, we're not done developing it, but we're gonna keep it out. We're gonna put it out there for you.
Right, like they got it to a point where it's almost like it was way, way, way further than like a beta. They wanted to get it out there, probably for monetary reasons, but also because it was something that they knew was solid enough that it would be an instant hit, just like all their other games.
Yeah.
And the core game itself was finished. It was just adding the extra details and some of the content packs that they're doing for free, because that's planned in their timeline. They wanted more. But they were like, you know what? Let's get our fans invested now because they're ready. And it's ready. And they did. It was perfect. I played it not day one, definitely like week or two, 1 or 2 that it came out. And it was solid. I was instantly sold.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I didn't play it until way later, actually, after like a couple updates.
Like into the winter update? Yeah.
Or no, I didn't even start playing it until like my birthday of this year. And that was after the Nighty Night update.
Oh, that's right. I missed that update altogether, actually. I haven't played it for a while.
And I know that's like, well, that's multiple updates after, but I was even blown away, though. It's like the core gameplay is just solid. It's like they don't need to work out any kinks. Now it's just adding things. And it's like the kinks weren't there when it launched. It was like, nope, we have something playable and great and we're going to share it. And that's a perfect way of doing it, because it's like, if you release a polished game, or at least the core mechanics are polished,
Yep.
you're gonna draw people in a lot quicker than if you just launch it too quick in early access. And there's tons of bugs in the gameplay and stuff.
Yep.
So
I think it's something else we could even take as a separate discussion in future episodes of this, is talking about the industry and the different approaches some of these companies take. Like Supergiant feels almost like a Blizzard approach, where they don't launch something until it's ready. And the problem being with Blizzard, in my opinion, that it takes forever. And rightfully so. They are on a scale that's gigantic.
yeah.
But I love that you can have something of that quality and caliber coming out of a smaller studio that's not even a small studio. I haven't looked them up, but I'm sure they're not tiny anymore. But they're definitely a personal studio that takes their fan base into consideration. And they're really in touch with that too. So, yeah, it's...
Yeah, I actually haven't looked up the actual history of Supergiant. I'm gonna pull that up real quick.
So I'm like, what? I'm trying to think what's my favorite element of this game? Like, what makes me just squeal in pleasure as I play it? I think that quality polish that you mentioned, where every loop you play feels fresh enough, because there's always something little that gets introduced to it. Or even if it was a repetition that I saw maybe in the earlier patches, it was still done with variance. And that, I think, it goes into the idea of flow. How well does the game flow across the board? Not just in various moments, but just every moment. That's the thing that sticks out to me the most in this game, was you go from a combat in a room into the audio productions just spot on every single moment, to the point where I'm swinging my sword and the last contact I make with an enemy and it bursts into a ball of flames, the music's concluding as that swing happens.
Yeah.
I'm like, holy cow, how good your event trigger processing is in your development team. It's like I've fiddled with some of those events in my very terrible experience of trying to make a game myself. It is not easy. Those subtleties are what define quality, in my opinion, in a game. Those attention, those little details that are the attention to that detail is what makes you achieve a great game. And I don't see it a lot in other roguelites. It's like there's some I do, and I think it depends on when they release, but I don't think there's anything about a Supergiant game, especially Hades, that I haven't seen that, where I just don't see that quality come out and shine. So that's my personal reason I give it an A+. I'm curious, what's yours?
Have you played Dead Cells?
Oh yeah, I played the heck out of that for a while.
That was a pretty decent roguelike when it first released as well. It was pretty polished. It's like, but I think, again, the whole aspect for me is that I burn out quickly on it because it seems so very repetitive. I'm not the best at roguelikes, so I die quite often. And so that's the difference with Hades and other roguelikes. It's like, I love it when they implement story to keep you coming back for more, even if it's just slight interactions with characters or whatever. And there's the whole aspect of giving that nectar to the characters and having reputation with the characters, and then you have different interactions because of that reputation. And it's like, just those little elements is this makes it stick out more than other roguelikes for me.
Yep.
And yeah, it's just, And I think the varied combat too. Because, like, with the different weapons and the different boons and the different combinations you can do. And it's like,
we
even.
didn't talk about that.
No.
The styles that you can play.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, I was really blown away with how each weapon is very unique and how the boons affect all the weapons differently.
Yep.
And they all have different effects on each different weapon. And then if you combine certain boons and special abilities, then it's even more different. So it's like, if it's not the story bringing you back, it's the varied combat. If you like combat a lot. And it's like, yeah, it's just really detailed in that regard. Because, like, I've looked it up. There's guides on, like, oh yeah, there's like super special abilities, because it's like, if you combine this boon with this boon, then it does this effect. And it's yeah, the synergies. And I'm like, okay. It's like, I'm not even there yet, but it's like, I'd like to learn and like discover these things on my own, you know.
Right.
And so
yeah, I'd like to talk about the controls and playstyle a little bit there for a second, because that's the thing that gets another element that's really well done in this game. Unlike other roguelites, I'm thinking like Binding of Isaac. Basic gameplay style is pretty much the same, with that focus on synergies where you can change up how you like to play based on the items you pick up. Whereas this one is like loadouts, and each loadout kind of lends itself to how a player wants to play a game, how they approach a situation. A ranged person, you got a bow, and it's a very slow style gameplay, but fun and methodical and thought out. Whereas grab a sword and it's kind of like that, I'm the warrior, I'm running in there like an
the
ARPG
standard
and I'm gonna
hack and
slash it
slash.
up.
Yeah.
Yep. And then other ones, I'm trying to remember some of the other ones. What's your favorite weapon that you use?
Well, there's the sword, spear, and then there's the shield,
Right.
and then the bow, and then
The shield was kind of like a boomerang, isn't it? You, like, throw it and it comes back to you.
And then there's a gauntlet and a gun.
Which I haven't gotten to the gun yet. I gotta try that.
I got it up to the gun. I haven't actually done a run through with the gun, but I tested it out, and it's, again, very different. You have ammo and you gotta reload. Oh, Moosey!
The dogs. I'm gonna mute you. Go ahead.
Okay, but yeah, and so with the different weapons, it's like, again, you think, well, okay, the gun is kind of methodical too, but it's interesting because it has that extra element of reloading, while the bow doesn't. So
Right. Oh, that's true. Yeah, the bow is just a charge-based weapon.
Yeah.
So it's like a charge shot.
the actual gun has a reload animation and everything.
Oh.
And so
nice.
I'm like, I was testing out, I'm like, how the heck is this gonna work? I mean, it's like, what am I gonna do? But you can still kind of dodge while you're reloading.
Right.
So it was very interesting. I haven't tested it out though, which was probably gonna be my next run
Yeah.
when I do play, so.
So, Hades, yay or nay?
Well, duh.
Yes.
Yes!
That's where I'm at. I'm like, it's just a solid game. I don't know how fun it would be for streamers to watch, people watching on streams and stuff, but that gameplay is so much fun. It's so satisfying and solid.
Oh yeah.
So,
So what's your favorite weapon that you've actually got, unlocked
well, I got
and
it
stuff?
through to the shield and tested that out. I tested each of the 4 base weapons, I think, that were original. So you had a spear, which is more like a heavy throw, and stab and jab kind of thing. Versus the sword is more AoE. You're coming, but you have to dash in there. You're aggressive. I love a good aggressive run when I'm just in the mood. I just love to be able to bounce around and smack the heck out of everything. But the bow, I had one of my most successful runs, I think. I got to level 3, like the first time I used the bow.
Yeah, that
Because
was
it's
mine
so
as well.
Powerful. But it's also very slow. It was a long run. It took about 40 minutes to even get to the second level, I think, or a third level to get through the second level. But it was that you're in for the long haul on that. And so, and then the shield I didn't play very much. It wasn't really my cup of tea. I'm really leaning kind of towards sword. That's my favorite so far. I want to get to the gun and test that out.
I've tried at least up to the twin fists, which is the gauntlets and stuff.
Right.
In a run.
Very fast.
That's the thing. That's another aspect of this game that makes it pretty cool, is because of each weapon allows players to have their own playstyle.
Yes. Yeah.
And
that's what I was meaning. Like, do you like to be aggressive? You grab a sword. If you like to be slow and methodical and approach things that way, grab the bow. You can instantly recommend something too, which is really cool.
And that's the thing. It's like that. I mean, even like, I'm not trying to like diss on Dead Cells. That was a really good roguelike as well. But it had like the different weapons that had its unique thing with the weapons and like the builds. But there was certainly like, oh, this build is more overpowered than all the others.
Right.
So you really crank it out, and that's what you go for like almost every run. After a certain point, that is. And it's like each weapon is so unique that I bet each weapon has its own like, oh, you should really mainline this if you want it to be the most overpowered because of how the boons work. But it allows that flexibility.
Yep.
And that's what makes it very unique.
It encourages it too.
Yes.
That's what's so cool. Yeah.
So
like, I'd almost want to set up like a challenge for me if I ever mastered this game, like some people do with certain roguelites, would be start a character which you just raw, no stat investment, nothing. Just you play and beat the game. I want to do that eventually. Just kind of like playing Zelda without picking up any hearts. That would be a fun challenge. To see how it is, because I just got to the second level in my first run after not playing it for over a month or two, and with the sword, and it was extremely powerful, just base everything. And you could easily, I think that's something that's really cool, is like a Zelda kind of style gameplay design. You don't need to upgrade. You could beat the game without doing anything. That's my opinion. I haven't beaten it yet.
Well, I think you could. I mean, that's the thing. We haven't beaten it, so we don't know like what the last, the final boss is like
near impossible
and stuff. But playing it through, even with like some of the special enemies that you encounter on each level, it's like if you are skilled enough to dodge at the right moment and things like that, and just again, it's skill based, and it's like I really think you could get through at least the majority of the game just by skill.
Oh yeah,
if you got good enough at it. So
I concur. So Hades, amazing game.
Yes.
Early access, but it's coming soon. I'm seeing on the main menu is launch 1.
Oh,
so 1.0
okay.
should be the real legit game, I think, at that point.
Oh,
I believe
good.
it's on sale now on Steam for their summer sale.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
but
practically everything's on sale.
full price, 100% worth it.
Yeah,
It's
even
only $20
even full price, it's totally worth it. Yeah, it's $19.99
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
right now. And that's 20% off. The base price is $24.99.
$25. Okay.
Yeah. And it's totally worth it. If you love roguelikes and you want a unique experience of a roguelike, definitely get it. If you're kind of on the fence with roguelikes, like I am usually, I still recommend getting it because the story will keep you going through it. So, and the character interactions.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Yes.
Well, take us out.
So yeah, that has been a deep dive into Hades. And this has been T-Strife Games. And I'm with my bro DerpThought. And
What up?
yeah, you can check us out. Check me out on YouTube. T-Strife Games on YouTube. I have a Twitch as well. And then my bro has a Twitch, DerpThought.
Just DerpThought.
Yep. And we're going to be trying to do some more deep dives in the future of different games and different aspects of gaming. And I hope you guys come back for more.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.